Hello everyone, we are DK Fields. You might notice that there are two of us here. I am Katherine Stansfield.
And I'm David Towsey.
And when we write together, when we co-write, we write under the name DK Fields. We'd just like to say a big thank you to Phil and everyone at the Super Relaxed Fantasy Club for giving us an opportunity to have a chat with you today. We're going to talk to you a little bit about our first co-written novel, Widow's Welcome, which is published by Head of Zeus. And this is a fantasy novel, the first in a trilogy. It is out in hardback, paperback, ebook and audio, published by the team at Head of Zeus. And we're just going to tell you a little bit about it today and also do a reading.
Yeah, so as Kath said, this is a fantasy novel, first in a trilogy. As well as being a fantasy novel, it's got a major crime element to it. The main narrative follows a detective in a secondary world fantasy as she tries to uncover the plot of a murder. Alongside that plot, our novel also includes, and our whole trilogy as a whole includes, a democratic electoral system where different realms, there's 6 in our fantasy world, send a storyteller to the capital, which is called Finest. Each of these realms send this storyteller in order to tell a story as part of the election, and the citizens in our fantasy world will vote on those stories. So there are 6 realms, 3 books. This is the first one. So as you can probably do the maths yourself, that's 2 stories per text, per book. And you get, as the reader, you get these stories in full. So you get to play along as one of the voters, if you will. So I'll give you a quick look at our map, which we're very happy with.
Very exciting to have a map.
Thanks to Head of Zeus. Yeah, wonderful map there of our realm, with our different 6 realms kind of represented on there as well. So yeah, as Kath said, we're going to do a little bit of a reading today, and she's going to explain what that's about.
I am. So we've got 6 realms in our union, and each realm is a very different group of people who have different cultural traditions, different lives. And in this first novel in the trilogy, Widow's Welcome, we get to hear the election story of the Quercus people. So I'm going to just read to you the beginning of that story now. What we tend to do at events is we ask the audience, those who've come along to hear, to vote on which of the 2 stories in this book they like the best, because we often read the start of each one and then we ask our listeners to vote, and we're going to give you the opportunity to do that as well. You can vote in the comments on this video, and we will, if you like, add them to the ongoing tally of election votes that we're keeping via our website. So this is the opening of the story of the Quercus people, and the Quercus are a people who travel the waterways of our union on barges. They're a maritime people, and everything about them involves rivers and watercourses. So this is the start of their election story that they're telling in order to win votes so that their realm can hold power over the union. The man was dying. That was what the boy said. He couldn't have been more than 10, maybe 11 years old, and he'd clearly been running for some way. He held onto the doorframe as he gulped at the hot night air. His skin, not just his face, but his arms and neck and shins, was as slick as the walls of my little hut. He's in a bad way, Sanger, the boy said. I glanced back down at my desk, where a fly was settling on my stew. Half a meal was probably more than I deserved. I picked up my small bag and made to leave, but the boy didn't move. He's not a rich man, Sanger. That's fine, I said. And he's been drinking. Days, maybe. Days? The boy checked both ways of the alley, then he lowered his voice. It's not that. Something else. You'll see. He made the sign of the tear, defiant in the face of my surprise. Lead on, I said, trying to hide my resignation at the prospect of seeing to another man near death at the bottom of a bottle. Late summer is a despicable time in Bordeaux. The very walkways and lakeside shacks swell in the muggy air. Everything drips despite the clear skies, and tempers are less frayed, more eviscerated. "Which bar?" I said to the back of the boy's head. "Barge of Good Hope," he said. I didn't know of it, but he was sure of his way as he ducked and weaved between empty alleys and boardwalks full of evening revellers. It may have been a holiday of some sort. I always found it difficult to keep track of those. The larger walks were lit by oil lamps swinging on short chains from balconies and eaves. Though soft, it was not a flattering light, and faces leered out of the crowd. Painted youngsters, some not much older than the boy I was following, made crude gestures from the balconies. It wasn't difficult to see their madams behind, more often than not waving their fans or scratching at their wigs. We passed one such establishment, the Merry Jig, where I was on the payroll. Madame Wishful saw me and pushed her way to the rail, much to the consternation of her charges. "Sanger Jeffreys," she called, loud enough to turn some heads. "Is it Tuesday already?" It was Friday. A hard-working sanger and worth every penny. No cheek in the Merry Jig goes unturned by his professional fingers. Some of the boys and girls pantomimed just what cheeks she was referring to, and laughter rose above the general din of the crowded walk. I hurried to keep up with the boy, and we made our way along the east shore of Bordeaux, passing through the busier districts. Then he turned towards the hills. The walks became streets, narrower than those by the shore. "Aren't we going the wrong way for a barge?" I said. And that's all you'll get of the Casker story for now. Dave is going to introduce us to another realm.
Yes, so the second story in Widow's Welcome is told by the Lowlanders. And that realm is, I suppose, known predominantly as the realm that produces the most food. They feed the Union of Realms. So they farm land, they farm fruit, they farm everything that produces food and keeps everyone eating in our fantasy realm. And so they are a very proud people for this. But they also have a lot of different traditions and kind of cultural touchstones, one of which is explored in this story. So I'll start from the beginning, and this is the Lowlander story. The talents of the boy Gen were first noted by his mother. It was she who watched him pinch off the early buds of myrtleberry branches without crushing the comings of the second, better berries beneath. She who saw the swiftness with which he cut back the cinder branches after harvest. Unlike his heavy-handed father, Gen lost none of the young fruit, even though the blades were large in his nimble fingers. This was in his 12th year of age, and his 7th year working all seasons in the fields the family leased from Hend, who owned much of the land in the valley at that time. It was his mother who had the idea, but she waited another season to be sure. Then she wrote to Sot, her sister, suggesting Sot should visit. It had been years since Sot had come to the house, despite the fact she lived nearby, only over the hill and 2 lanes more. But Aunt Sot was a busy person, too busy to come to the fields Gen's parents farmed, and too busy to be visited. Gen wasn't sure what it was that kept Aunt Sot so busy, but it wasn't farming, and therefore it wasn't something his parents spoke of. But his mother did speak often of Aunt Sot's wealth, her good linens, and how she could drink granol every night if she wanted to, rather than only on harvest days to toast the neighbour like they did. Aunt Sot could bathe in granol if she liked, so his mother said. At these words, Gen's father sighed and stared sadly at the walls of the kitchen that needed tempering still, the cupboard doors hanging not quite square, and somehow he stared past those doors to the damp creeping at the back of those cupboards. And then he went out to walk the edges of the fields. The rest of the family knew he must be left to do so alone. His walks eased his worries, of which he had many. None of his worries were the fault of Sot, of course. Gen knew that it was Hend, the landowner, who kept his family poor from bathing in Grainel, and that was because Hend's rents were high. Gen's parents farmed well. They were good tenants who brought forth row after row of myrtles, glossy cinters, medlars that lasted 2 seasons once boxed and put to rest in dark barns, and red hollands when everyone else in the valley only managed green, and even figs, which, as everyone in the valley knew, were vulnerable to blight.
So there you have the start of 2 election stories, and the way the stories work is they inflect some of the concerns in the Union at this time. So the different realms use their story as an opportunity to comment on the larger concerns of the Union and to suggest how they might address them. So the idea is that they are entertaining as stories to win a vote, but that they also have a political message there as well. And you've just had 2 tiny tastes, the Quercus that I read and the Lowlanders that Dave read, and we'd love for you to vote for your favourite one, imagining that you were in the audience deciding who would have power in the so that's Widow's Welcome.
Yeah, and the next instalment, for those who are interested, is called The Stitcher and the Mute. It's already appearing online and should be released towards the autumn. So that's exciting, and we hope to do something else with the Super Relaxed Fantasy Club when hopefully things have got back a little bit to normal. We can say that.
And when we're allowed outside again, that would be great.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, like many of you, I'm sure, we are making good inroads in our reading, in our to be read pile, and we thought we would just tell you a little bit about what we're reading at the moment. So, why pass?
Shall I go? Okay,
yeah,
I'll go first. Okay, so we enjoyed this part of other people's videos, so we thought we'd share our own. So at the moment, I'm reading the first book in the Cornish Trilogy. Titus Grown, and I'm almost finished with that and very much enjoying it. But I think what I might do between the books, rather than read the whole trilogy as a whole, what I might do is intersperse it with some short stories, which gives me a bit of a different different pace. And for that, I'm looking forward to starting the Broken Stars anthology, produced by our publisher as well, Head of Zeus, which is 16 stories from Chinese science fiction, which I have to admit I haven't read as much as I would have liked to. So I'm hoping this anthology will not only kind of shore up that, but also introduce me to a lot of really great new writers.
And I'm currently rereading Bring Up the Bodies by Hilary Mantel. This is the second in her Thomas Cromwell trilogy. I finished Wolf Hall yesterday. Now on Bring Up the Bodies, kind of getting ready to read The Mirror in the Light, which is the third and final instalment in that Tudor series, which I've really, really enjoyed. It's very immersive historical fiction, which completely takes me away from what's happening now. And after I finish that trilogy, I'm going to read next The Breach, which is the new novel by Matt Hill. And I think Matt has been along to the Super Relaxed Fantasy Club as a guest. And Matt's a great friend of ours and a fantastic writer. We both really enjoy his work. So this is out now, The Breach, out with Titan. So we're going to probably fight over which of us is able to read this first. So that's.
Well, it looks like you're winning.
Yeah, that's it. I've got hold of it. So that's our reading, and it's been wonderful to have the opportunity to tell you a little bit about our writing as DK Fields, our kind of double act. And I think that's probably where we'll leave it.
Yes. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Stay well. Bye.